Carly Browning, immersed in her musings, glided through the cobblestone streets, noisily meeting the wind as she made her way towards a new candidate. The gray clouds in the sky reflected her mood. She was on the verge of an important decision. In her hands, she held a report in which the outline of a unique figure, a newcomer who could change the course of events, peered brightly. As the wheels of the carriage slid rhythmically along the sidewalk, Carly immersed herself in the details of the report, which revealed to her a portrait of a promising candidate. His uniqueness permeated the lines and words, creating a vivid picture in her mind of a potential game changer. The report, like a spell, conjured up before her the image of the person she was about to meet. The uniqueness of the candidate blossomed in the descriptions of his abilities and character. Her imagination flashed pictures of a future where this young man, despite his youth, would be the key to change. Gradually, the carriage drew closer to its destination, and Carly's inner dialogue became more and more intense. Excitement and determination mingled in her soul, creating a charge of energy that was felt even in the swirl of wind that permeated the space around the carriage. Thus, Carly Browning, engrossed in thoughts of the future candidate, continued on her way, rushing towards an encounter that would probably turn the current reality upside down. When the carriage finally slowed to a stop, Carly Browning sighed, feeling the tension in her body begin to relax. On the narrow sidewalk, obliterated by time, she was to continue her journey on foot. The old stone houses that surrounded the alley, like silent witnesses to the past, watched her every step. Together with her faithful assistant Harper, they left the comfortable walls of the carriage and entered a mysterious alleyway. The narrow path between the houses made it seem as if they had crossed a portal to another era. The old stone beneath their feet whispered stories, and the facades of the buildings expressed their individuality in every curve and pattern. Walking through this architectural labyrinth, Carly couldn't help but notice how every stone, every crack in the walls told its own story. It was an alley that radiated not only antiquity but also a particle of mysterious energy that hung in the air, like an echo of the past, slowly unraveled by time. The whole atmosphere breathed of antiquity, and Carly, accompanied by Harper, continued on her way, savoring every step. The alley was narrow and mysterious, but there was an unexplored history hiding in the narrowness that only heightened Carly's interest in her destination. Everything about the alley, whether it was the old stone or the quiet breeze, reminded her that her meeting with the new candidate promised to be extraordinary, just like this unique corner of the city itself. When Carly, filled with anticipation, knocked firmly on the massive doors, she could not have guessed that the response to her touch would be so unexpected. The door slowly swung open, and the form of a young candidate appeared before her. Carly's gaze paused on that unremarkable threshold, but not to discern a degree of professionalism or experience. The candidate on the doorstep caught her eye, not for his businesslike facial features, but for his youth. Carly's gaze lowered smoothly, like a dance of time, when she realized that the child in front of her was a child. This extraordinary moment intertwined her feelings: surprise, doubt, and incredible determination. The apparent disparity in the candidate's age and Carly's expectations created a mysterious aura around this meeting. She gazed into the eyes of the prospective participant, whose eyes sparkled with inexperience, but at the same time an undeniable desire to prove her worth. The moment Carly lowered her gaze, she saw not only a face, but a potential that remained untapped, like an open book waiting to be read. Though the child stood before her, a spark of the future flickered in his eyes, ready to burst forth with renewed vigor. Meeting this candidate promised to open the door to a world of possibilities, where age became a mere number and each person's story a unique tale worth telling. Carly suddenly realized that the boy's face was expressing disbelief and bewilderment. The unwillingness to listen to her words became apparent, and the little candidate raised his hand to close the door. But Carly wasn't going to give up so easily. She inhaled deeply, realizing that she not only held the key to the kid's career, but also the opportunity to awaken his potential. Boldly stepping forward, Carly began to tell him about herself. She unfolded the scope of her accomplishments in front of him. "I am Carly Browning, owner of the Premier Brownings Company," she pronounced. The boy, however, seemed to be undeterred. Unwilling to entrust his dreams to such a grown woman, he began to slowly close the door. Carly felt the chance to bring change into his life slipping away, But that's when her guards intervened. The guards, staring menacingly at the boy, were determined not to let the door close. Their muscular figures created an impenetrable barrier, emphasizing the seriousness of the situation. The boy, yielding to the pressure, stopped, and the door remained ajar, as if giving him another chance to hear something that could change his life. Feeling some tension in the air, Carly glanced at her guards with a smile. "Guys, we need to make this look less dramatic," she whispered, as if urging that their presence would not cause the boy to be overly apprehensive. In response to her words, the guards relaxed slightly, still maintaining their readiness if necessary. Finally, the boy, influenced by the setting and perhaps Carly's sense of humor, decided to open up. With a little startled smile, he agreed to listen to the guests. Carly, undaunted by his charm, introduced herself, revealing not only her status but also the sincerity of her intentions. In that moment, she realized that the mysterious moment of the meeting could have grown into an opportunity to unravel the mysteries of the future. The boy, whose eyes expressed uncertain fear, paused for a moment, wavering between closing the door and interest in the unfamiliar scene. Carly, noticing his indecision, approached him with a smile full of warmth and understanding. "Just listen, Esalad Elad," she addressed the boy, trying to soften the excitement that sparkled in his eyes. Carly, probably in the midst of her story, suddenly realized that her special candidate was just a child. Carly's inner monologue slowed for a moment, as if traveling through a vortex of time to take in this unexpected paradox. But instead of giving way to doubt, Carly, with the utmost professionalism, decided not to let this fact cloud her resolve. She concluded her representative speech with incredible ease, noting that fate had presented her with an unusual, but all the more interesting challenge. A month ago, an incident unfolded within the walls of the luxurious Lily Hotel that left a shadow on an otherwise immaculate picture of luxury and comfort. When Carly Browning checked into this luxurious retreat as usual, no one foresaw that beneath the smooth surface such an unpleasant turn of events would occur. A criminal, a shadowy figure in the game of light and darkness, has crept into the sacred space of her room, disturbing the peace that is so valued in luxury hotels. This very subject was the subject of a heated discussion between Harper, Carly's loyal associate, and the hotel manager. The entire staff was excitedly discussing security measures, and everyone was whispering about how such a thing could happen in such a prestigious place. While Harper was discussing the details of the incident, describing the consequences and steps being taken to prevent such a thing from happening in the future, Carly herself, lightly ensconced in the same room, tried to at least break the deafening atmosphere of the discussion with her presence. Sitting up with a careless gleam in her eyes, she tried to seduce sleep to temporarily escape the whirlwind of circumstances. But even at this moment, she couldn't refrain from smiling lightly, as if even an incident in a luxury hotel couldn't throw her into despondency. Harper, trying to bring seriousness to a light-hearted moment, looked at Carly carefully, as if his words were meant to pass through a cloud of nonchalance. "Carly, this is a serious situation," he said with a hint of concern in his voice. "This is no time for jokes." Despite Harper's entreaties, however, Carly maintained her light-hearted attitude. Her smile, like an invisible shield, reflected the tension, preventing it from fully penetrating her mind. "Harper, darling, it'll get better," she tossed, as if anticipating the waves of unbelievability that might come over their tranquility. However, Harper, steadying himself on the ground of reality, began to convey important details of the incident. He explained that when the perpetrator broke in, not only were valuables missing, but also a key and a staff member from the front desk. "That could mean we had accomplices at the hotel," Harper emphasized, looking into her eyes with a seriousness that demanded attention. But Carly, as if in a dance with trouble, continued to glide smoothly over the surface of events despite the shadow of mystery hanging in the air. Harper, sweeping away Carly's levity, brought seriousness to the conversation. "This incident poses a threat not only to you, Carly, but to the regular hotel guests as well. How could you have such poorly trained staff?" He voiced his concerns, addressing the hotel manager. He sounded dissatisfied and eager to resolve the situation. The manager, facing criticism, tried to justify himself. "We are taking all the safety measures we can. This was an unexpected incident, and we are working to prevent similar incidents in the future." Carly, looking up from her musings, replied lightly, "Well, who could have known about something like this in advance?" Her words, it seemed, despite the gravity of the situation, sounded like an incredible motto of optimism. She, like an artist, with a slight movement of her hand, ordered the manager out of the office, as if completing an act of power. The manager, like a frightened rabbit, instantly fled the office when Carly, with a slight movement of her hand, ordered him to leave. Immediately after his disappearance, Harper exhaled, feeling the tension leave his body. He pronounced that Carly was being too generous, which he felt only made it harder to solve problems. Carly only smiled in response to the remark, recognizing her tendency to approach situations on the positive side. Harper, you're always too strict. That's what allows me to relax and find balance in all these unpleasant situations, she remarked, as if trying to convey to him that sometimes levity was also a kind of strength. There was a joke in their differences, but also some truth that seemed to bind them together. Suddenly, interrupting the routine conversation, Carly said that she herself had been frightened by the moment when the Baron's second son had broken into her room. This unexpected episode had evidently caused in her a degree of uneasiness which became visible even in her usually unconcerned smile. Harper, attentive to her words, replied that the Baron's chief lawyer and treasurer had already been sent to the Baron. The conversation suddenly took a new turn, taking on the tone of a legal drama. Tension, like a ghost, overshadowed the joy of the previous discussion, and the room fell silent. Carly, with a dark shadow of misunderstanding in her eyes, realized the gravity of the implications of the intrusion, and Harper, maintaining his resolve, realized that they faced a battle with the Baron's influence where every move required careful planning and determination. In that moment, their alliance became a barrier to the challenges they would face ahead. Carly, with some irritation in her voice, began to express her displeasure that she actually just wanted to relax, enjoying the comforts of a luxury hotel. In her opinion, the interference of criminals was something ridiculous, and even more ridiculous was the attention she had to pay to this bad episode. She remarked that she just wanted to rest a bit, enjoying the tranquility of the hotel while lamenting the lack of opportunity to enjoy her plans for relaxation. Her words seemed to echo with a tinge of fatigue and disappointment. In her mind, this whole incident was simply incomprehensible, and she didn't even try to delve into the logic of the criminals' actions. She added with a note of bewilderment that she didn't understand the point of their actions at all. In Carly's world, where the struggle for success and power went hand in hand with the image of comfort, the infiltration of criminals seemed only a strange departure from the ordinary. She probably couldn't fathom how such things could affect her carefree world, where every day was almost like a perfect picture painted with the brush of luxury. The main company, Brownings, stood out as the largest merchant in the kingdom, and its influence lived up to its name. The company's symbol of the raven became an integral part of the landscape, permeating every corner of the kingdom. This graceful feathered creature became not only a sign of quality products and services, but also a symbol of reliability that instilled confidence in the hearts of consumers. As guardians of the kingdom's borders, Browning's ravens penetrated the most remote regions, spreading their wings over every market and trading post. The symbol hung like a black robe over prosperous cities and mysterious villages, making each place part of the Brownings' trading world. In every hue of the crow's feather read a story of success and longevity, and its cry echoed across the lands, a reminder that the great company watched every move and strove to maintain standards of quality in every corner of the realm. People might not know who exactly owned their kingdom, but legends of Carly were everywhere. Stories about her spread like the wind, carrying a story that seemed like a miracle. From a poor girl in the blink of an eye, she had become the richest person in their kingdom. Legends of Carly's exceptional fortune were intertwined with mystical tales, as if her rise to wealth was something supernatural. Stories of her fearlessness and unyielding determination created an image of a leader who could overcome even the most difficult circumstances. In every village, in every market, these legends became a kind of mythology that soared above reality, emphasizing Carly's incomparable influence. She became a symbol of hope, proof that even from the humblest of beginnings, something great could be created. And while her name may not have always been associated with formal power, Carly's legends cemented her place in people's hearts, making her the unofficial but influential ruler of her kind. However, faced with Carly's splendor and her undeniable success, a problem arose. Crowds of guys lined up, hoping to become her husband and thus possibly seize a piece of her impressive fortune. It was a torrent of ambition and dreams that created a whirlwind of emotions in her surroundings. Carly, as if becoming the center of attention, has become the object of desire of many, willing to go to any lengths to win her attention. At times, it seems as if the whole world is eager to become her lover in order to share in the wealth she has created. This unexpected side of her fame became a source of concern, generating not only admiration, but also obsessive interest from those who saw her not only as a business lady, but also as a source of family wealth. The men spared no expense, using the whole arsenal, from formal requests with offers of land and precious gifts to outright harassment. Carly, listening to this flood of eagerness, remembered the moment when she had slapped one particularly insolent guy between the legs. This decisive response drew not only surprise all around, but also support from her staunch ally, Harper, who praised the blow, saying Carly had done a really good job in defense of her independence. This steadfastness and strength of character was the answer to the annoying attempts to invade her private sphere. Everything from bought offerings to insolent harassment crashed against Carly's solid shield, protecting her own desires and freedom. Each blow was not only an act of self-defense, but an expression of her determination to fight for what was around her and what she had created. Carly and Harper were exhausted from the obsessive advances of multiple men. With each new approach, they felt their patience stretching to the limit, especially since they didn't know how far the next pushy suitor would go. The question was, what should they do? Encounters with persistent admirers became a source of fatigue and irritation. As Carly and Harper considered their tactics, they realized they needed to take steps to protect their privacy and maintain balance in their busy lives. Deciding to discuss the issue, they began strategizing on how to avoid the constant invasion of suitors and keep calm in this whirlwind of unwanted attention. Suddenly, Carly had a vision, and the fire of unexpected ideas flashed in her eyes. She stood up with a beaming smile of mirth and suggested that Harper buy her a husband. "After all, there's nothing the Brownings can't buy," she added, with a slight hint of her influential status. The suggestion sounded like a joke, but at the same moment it had Carly's well-known tendency to find unpredictable and funny solutions to everyday situations. Harper, catching that characteristic touch of eccentricity, responded to her suggestion with a groggy laugh, realizing that even in the most unusual moments, Carly knew how to remain steadfast and creative. Marquis Elad was looking at Carly with a flaw of apprehension when she suddenly blossomed into a smile. There was a certain wariness in his eyes, a displeasure that the situation was out of his control. Elad was trying to puzzle out her intentions, and this moment of tension added to the mysteriousness of their meeting. Despite the apprehension in his gaze, Carly continued to show confidence, maintaining her smile. In this moment, the energy of surprise and possible change that could affect the course of their destinies hovered between them. Carly Browning glanced confidently at the Marquis of Hellas, whose eyes expressed some apprehension. But the next moment something in her changed, and a playful smile blossomed on her face. At the moment when the atmosphere of tension began to make itself felt, Carly, straying from the routine, announced something unexpected. Amidst the Marquis's surprised silence, she remarked in a light tone that perhaps such a proposal seemed ridiculous for a first meeting. However, with a smirk, she offered Elad to be her husband. This unexpected turn of events not only gave the story a strange twist, but also lifted the veil on new and unexpected twists and turns in Carly's life. Marquis Helad's eyes almost fell out of his head in surprise when Carly uttered her unusual words. He slowly repeated her phrase in his mind, not believing his ears. However, to make sure he had understood correctly, he did not hide his surprise and asked her to repeat what she had said. "I'm sorry, you said what?" Elad said with some uncertainty, shaking himself out of his surprise. There was genuine confusion in his voice, and the moment added even more intrigue to an already puzzling encounter. Carly, keeping her smile intact, witnessed the reaction of the Marquis, who found himself drawn into an unexpected maelstrom of events. With a confidence and ease in her voice that seemed disproportionate to the seriousness of what was being said, Carly repeated her sentence. It seemed to her that such words were just part of everyday conversation, despite the embarrassment that could be felt by the world around her. "She offered you to be my husband," as if rising above the ordinariness of this unusual situation. Her tone of equanimity and playful smile created a contrast to Marquis Helad's confusion. Carly, as if playing some intriguing game, continued to maintain the atmosphere of mystery and surprise. Marquis Alad met Carly's gaze in silence, as if there were many unread secrets lurking in his eyes. At the moment when the tension in the room was becoming almost palpable, the girl, without losing her confidence, clarified what was the reason for this unexpected turn of events. She had sent Marquis Alad a letter. Carly maintained her smile, but there were sparks of curiosity and a certain cunning in her eyes. Like an inveterate gambler, she opened the cards gradually, letting the Marquis feel that their meeting was becoming more and more mysterious. Elad, meanwhile, remained puzzled, trying to unravel the mystery behind this unusual confession. Elad replied that he had never received a letter from her, and this unexpected detail stunned Carly. For a moment, tension hung in the room, as if a dice thrown into the air had found itself in an unexpected position. The gazes of the Marquise and the businesswoman met in a dark dance of surprise and suspicion. A trace of doubt flashed in her eyes, while Elad, keeping his outward composure, tried to understand why she was asserting something he did not remember. This moment of misunderstanding added a new twist of intrigue to an already rich plot. Carly, feeling perplexed by Helad's response, turned to Harper, seeking clarification. But instead of receiving an assurance that the letter had been sent, she heard from him something quite unexpected. Harper stated that the letter should have been delivered to the Marquis long ago. This sudden turn of events confused Carly again, causing her to feel a sense of disbelief at what was happening. It was at this very moment, when the tension in the room was almost palpable, that the mailman knocked on the door. His sudden appearance came like a ray of light in a room shrouded in mystery, breaking the thick fog of misunderstanding. Carly and Harper exchanged glances, their attention completely absorbed by the approaching mailman, who might have brought with him the answers to many questions. The letter carrier politely handed Carly a letter clearly marked with the stamp of her own company. The moment her gaze fell on that distinctive stamp, she suddenly felt an inner relief mixed with a note of surprise. The stamp was like a signature of time, capturing the moment the paper emerged from the southern sunlight in the letter carrier's hands. This episode gave Carly unmistakable confirmation that the Marquis had indeed not received the letter. Her eyes went up to the letter carrier, as if her gaze was hidden in the gateway of some secret. Whether she should now believe what had been said earlier, or whether this book of the story was just beginning to unfold, was a question she had yet to find an answer to. A panicked Carly couldn't contain her excitement and, with a worried look in her eyes, asked the letter carrier why the letter had been delayed. In response, the chatty letter carrier, moving seamlessly from episode to episode, recounted a recent case of food poisoning that had paralyzed the delivery service for days. The excitement in the room grew, and then the letter carrier began to go into excessive detail about the incident. But when Carly, horrified, tried to stop him, he suddenly disappeared in silence, leaving behind only a swirl of innuendo and a lingering mystery. Carly, barely able to prevent the mailman's path to the wrong details, stood there, feeling the mysterious secrets of the story still hovering in the air, waiting to be unraveled. With this sudden story of writing, poisoning, and excessive detail, Carly had a headache. The excitement, the tension, and the flood of unexpected events had created a real muddle in her mind. She felt a throbbing pain spreading across her temple, as if every detail of this unusual story was a piece of a puzzle suddenly falling into place. With her eyes closed, Carly stood trying to cope with the sudden migraine, brought on not only by physical discomfort but also by the flood of mysterious events on which she had been thrown. Not only were pain pulses swirling in her head, but questions demanding immediate answers. Carly, confused by the throbbing pain in her temples, slowly opened her eyes. Her gaze met Marquis Helad's, who didn't seem to take his attention off her. There was no expression of sympathy in his eyes, as if he didn't even feel her discomfort, and wasn't ready to support her in this difficult moment. This brief glance became an instant bridge between the two heroes, as if in this brief exchange of glances was a whole story, a story of secrets, mysteries, and unexpected twists and turns that was just beginning to unfold. Elad, appearing phlegmatic, shifted his gaze to the letter in his hands. Carly, sensing that the time for clarification had come, finally gathered her resolve. With a muffled pain in her head, she pointed decisively at the letter and, turning to the Marquis, clarified that this was the very issue she was questioning him about. At that moment, there was a tension in the room, as if there was not only pain and fatigue in the air, but also an anticipation of the resolution of the intrigue. Carly and Elod's eyes met again, this time with a certain expectation of the inviolability of the truth. Elad, who met Carly's gaze, expressed disappointment in his eyes. The moment the truth began to come to light, revealing complex secrets and intrigues, the Marquis found that the answers didn't always come as one expected. Elad's eyes reflected a sense of disappointment that he may have expected a different turn of events. In the silence of his gaze lay a whole host of questions waiting to be answered in this exciting journey through a maze of mystery and surprise. Confusion swept over Carly like a wave of sudden shyness. Her confidence and determination, which she usually exuded, now gave way to a certain timidity. Carly's gaze ducked slightly, as if she was witnessing the inconsistencies in her own expectations. Elad stared disappointedly, and Carly, feeling the weight of the moment, tried to pull herself together and find the words to rectify the situation. In a moment of surging emotion, a sudden memory popped into Carly's head. She remembered exactly what criteria she'd set for herself when thinking about a future spouse. Those thoughts took her back to the past, when ambitions and fears had woven the complex web of her views on her own future. Trapped in that memory, Carly realized she needed a man from a good family with connections, someone who could accept her. A girl on the precipice of poverty, lacking connections and ambition, but possessing great wealth. This memory suddenly illuminated her like a bright beacon in the dark ocean of her own feelings and desires. She began to realize that this path she had chosen was not only about intrigue and business, but also about her own inner struggles and aspirations. In a moment of realization, it suddenly became clear to Carly that these demands for a future husband had surfaced in her mind as a reaction to the emotions triggered by the incident at the hotel. This sudden vividness of the criteria was something like a reflection in a mirror of the turbulent feelings and fears that had surged in her soul after the attack. Confusion swept over her as Carly realized that she was now facing the mirror of her emotional hesitations and sudden demands. Carly, sensing the inner dissonance of her own demands, couldn't resist making a sincere confession. With mixed feelings of humor and self-irony, she remarked that her criteria might sound more like the speech of a villain in a movie. There was an unusual combination of irony and sincerity in her words that revealed the depth of her self-understanding. A silence enveloped the office, like an empty theater after a backstage conversation. This moment, accompanied by Carly's words, was a kind of internal plot twist, adding a new layer of depth and understanding to the story. There was not only irony in the silence, but also a noticeable tension, as if the characters themselves did not know what awaited them in the next chapter of their unusual story. Carly, pouting, declared that at least Harper could have told her that her words sounded different from the villain's. Her voice was a mixed tone of question and resentment, as if she expected her staunch ally to offer some support or clarification at this unusual moment. The silence in the office, as if echoing her words, became heavy and poured with some unspoken emotion. Carly's gaze waited for a response, but there was an uncertain feeling in the air, as if the story had just taken a new turn, forcing the heroes to face yet another challenge. Harper, sensing that it was time for clarification, dared to ask if Carly was really going to get married. At that moment, the tension in the office, as if in a continuous plot, rose to a new level, waiting for an answer that could change the course of their entire story. Carly, as if weighing her decisions, nodded in affirmation. In that nod was not only agreement to the formal act of marriage, but also an acknowledgement that her private life, having been the subject of discussion and intrigue, was once again the focus of attention. At that moment their gazes met, and in that fleeting contact lay the realization that this conversation was only the beginning of more, that several more chapters of their exciting story awaited them. Amy Rose, the company's chief financial officer, intervened in the silence, reminding everyone that Carly herself had stated that she didn't want to get married. Her voice sounded like a neutral note in this symphony of emotions, while the characters' gazes shifted to her, as if looking for definition in this difficult question. Amy, as an outsider, reminded everyone that Carly's decisions and aspirations are subject to change. Amy, recalling the many promises Carly had made earlier, that she would choose to live in the embrace of wealth and, upon her death, bequeath everything to her employees and donate some of the proceeds to a charitable orphanage, commented on how strange it sounded now to hear Carly contemplating marriage. Her words called to mind the ideals Carly had expressed in the past and created an additional layer of reflection among those gathered. This evocative disconnect between Carly's previous statements and new plans for marriage added drama to the moment, as if the characters were facing an unexpected twist that would require further clarification and possibly change not only the course of the plot but also the characters' own views on their own decisions. Ernest, acting as lead counsel, expressed his displeasure and disagreement with Amy's statements. He pointed out that it was unethical to discuss Carly's early death, explaining that such reasoning was pointless because the sooner she died, the sooner the company would lose revenue. Ernest, as a lawyer, brought an element of rationality to the discussion, reminding everyone of the business aspects and consequences associated with such reasoning. His words added a critical note to the discussion, emphasizing that even in moments of emotional tension, business logic and responsibility must be adhered to. In response to Ernest's objections, Amy, expressing her sincere wishes for Carly, wished her to live her life as she wished. She then suggested that, after the very height of the company, Carly might leave it, if that should be her wish. Ernest, who was standing nearby, echoed Amy's words. These words, like a peace agreement in a world of business and emotion, brought a brief but noticeable calm to the discussion. In this lively dialogue, the hope for freedom and the desire to respect personal decisions resounded, creating a distinctive relationship between the characters and hinting that there is much more behind the story. Carly, despite her usual confidence and steadfastness, could not help but notice these cold statements that disrupted the usual rhythm of business conversations. Her words sounded like a quiet but firm acknowledgement that she was aware of these unpleasant wishes directed in her direction. Carly's gaze expressed a mixture of surprise and determination, as if she was ready to face the challenges and accusations that had risen to the surface. A sudden smile appeared on Carly's face, as if she realized that such dark moods could not be a barrier to her mood of life. With that smile, she noted that she could not limit herself to capital growth. Carly said something about how it's not every day you meet a 21-year-old single girl with a fortune that will last for another 3 generations, creating an unexpected twist in the discussion. These words sounded like a kind of challenge to stereotypes and expectations, breaking the limits of the expected behavior of a successful businesswoman. Amy, reacting to the unexpected turn in the conversation, noted that such an event would cause a furor and shock the entire legal department. Her words sounded like an anticipation of possible repercussions and rumors that would engulf the internal affairs of the company. At this point, the discussion took a new direction, where the internal intrigues and difficulties of running a business met with possible external reactions. Those gathered joined in a discussion of the problems that might arise from the various suitors at Carly's door. The room filled with voices full of concern and laughter as the characters tried to anticipate the difficulties each candidate might create. Discussing these potential scenarios became a sort of collective advocacy exercise for Carly. Gradually, their conversation turned to how to avoid making mistakes in choosing a future husband for Carly. They came to the general conclusion that the choice of a husband for Carly should be made from among the nobles and aristocrats, and began to actively compile a list of potential candidates. The room was filled with energy and excitement, and everyone in the room contributed ideas and suggestions to this difficult selection. Compiling the list became a strategic process where each candidate was carefully analyzed and their pros and cons discussed. The task was not just to find a husband for Carly, but to ensure her stability and security in the future. Different voices were heard in this process, and the characters, together with the audience, embarked on a fascinating journey of choosing the perfect life partner. Carly, with interest and attention, began to study the list of potential candidates. Her eyes lingered on each name, her face expressing thought and evaluation of each aristocrat. The list, like an open book, provided her with a glimpse into the potential future and a chance to choose the one who would be her companion on this unpredictable journey. Carly glanced at the list of potential suitors provided to her with a slight mocking smile, and the young 15-year-old Marquis of Alad stood out in the front row of photos. Bewilderment flashed in her eyes, and she didn't hold back her sarcastic tone when she asked. Carly tossed the list back on the table with ease, allowing her quick thoughts to discern the possible motives for this strange choice. She was prepared for any surprises, though, for her life was already full of mystery and intrigue. The new turn of events presented by the Marquis of Helad has added an exceptionally unpredictable element to her life. How did this young aristocrat fit into the picture of her future choice of husband? Carly thoughtfully considered each option, ready for the answer to be far more complicated than she could have imagined. Carly shouted, emphasizing that it was impossible to even consider marrying a teenager who was 6 years younger than she was. Her voice pierced the space, as if reflecting her determination and rejection of the idea. Carly's gaze sparkled, and her words echoed around the room with the force of conviction. Harper, cool and judicious, replied that such differences in age were normal among aristocrats. He didn't think it was unusual or unacceptable in their circles, despite Carly's open remarks. Thus there was a tense atmosphere in the room, where the clash of opinions and values created more than just a discussion. Carly's and Harper's views led in different directions, but their dialogue was not only about official positions, but also about personal convictions that could make the plot's further twists and turns unpredictable. Suddenly, Amy interjected, expressing her opinion that 15 was a decent age for an aristocratic family. Her statement carried a touch of confidence, and she asked Carly if she was going to furnish the bridal chamber for the Marquis. This statement from the girl greatly embarrassed Carly, creating an uneasy feeling both in space and in her own thoughts. Under Amy's scrutiny, Carly felt on edge, as if her personal decisions were being discussed. The unexpected intrusion into the intimate aspects of her spouse's choices made the situation even more tense. As a businesswoman accustomed to controlling her own destiny, she felt that her personal decisions were now becoming part of the public discourse. Amy, with her unexpected questions, added a new layer of complexity to the story, rocking Carly's stability and emphasizing that there was no room for personal secrets in her life. Carly, faced with intrusive verbal attacks, fought back embarrassedly, trying to keep her composure in this unexpected storm. Her responses sounded a patina of distaste, but there was enough willpower to maintain control. Despite her resistance, however, Amy did not relent, as if pursuing her own agenda. This clash of words and emotions created a spectacle that filled the room with tension. All eyes were on Carly and Amy, as if a drama was playing out on the stage where every word mattered. In a world of intrigue and business, even mundane conversations could turn into something more, and now the drama was not only about choosing a husband but also about personal spaces and boundaries. As the emotional tension in the room reached its peak, Ernest, Carly's chief lawyer, intervened in what was happening. He handed her a list of candidates, asking her to read it in full and only then decide whether she wanted to marry the Marquis of Hellas. Ernest, being a man of the law, gave Carly the opportunity to look at the alternatives and weigh her choices. As if offering her a map with different directions, he emphasized that she held the key to the future. Carly, immediately sensing the hint that she might find the other candidates less attractive than the young Marquis, felt the weight of responsibility for her choice. This unexpected presentation of information added a new element to the complex puzzle of choosing a spouse. Carly sat down slowly and carefully, taking in the list of candidates Ernest had provided. In silence, eyes watching her every move, she began to leaf through the pages. Moments stretched long, as if time stood still waiting for her decision. Sheet by sheet, Carly studied names, surnames, and perhaps most importantly, their statuses and influences. In this process, each candidate became part of a mosaic portrait of her future. Deep thought was reflected in her eyes, and she felt the weight of the decision, for each choice could affect not only her personal life, but her business relationships as well. There was an atmosphere of expectation in the room where even the rustle of turning pages seemed like a mystery, and the answer that would eventually come out promised to be both a key and a lock for further events. In silence, punctuated only by the slight rustle of the pages being turned, they watched their mistress Carly. Her attention to each candidate was evident, as if each name on the page was an important piece of the picture of her future. The eyes of her companions continuously glided over her expressive face, trying to catch hints and reflections of her inner feelings. Tension hung in the room, becoming an invisible bridge between Carly's fate and the people at the threshold of her decision. The silence was not only a sign of respect for her personal space, but also signified an understanding that these moments were pivotal for their mistress and perhaps for everyone involved in the intrigue surrounding her husband's choice. Placing the list on the table with a noticeable sigh, Carly covered her face with her hands. At that moment, her gesture became a symbol of inner tension and reflection. In her silent pose, she seemed to drift away into her inner world, where heavy thoughts and unbelievable decisions wove their threads. To her, the other candidates on the list seemed like hell. Her hands, covering her face, seemed to be a shield against the uncertainty and constant agony of choice. The room fell silent again, as if everyone in the room sensed the importance of this moment in Carly's life. Carly, ascending the threshold, entered the house where the Marquis of Elad was. At that moment, an atmosphere of suspense seemed to envelop her, and her footsteps sounded like the voice of her decision. Each step into the interior of the house brought her closer to the important moment in her life. The bright lights inside the house gave the atmosphere a cozy atmosphere, and every creak of the wooden floor foreshadowed a meeting that could change the course of events. Carly, inwardly preparing for her conversation with the Marquis, felt the stares and anticipation of those who witnessed her step into the unknown. Carly's stern gaze was fixed on Elad's face, scanning every feature of his face. The Marquis seemed far removed from his 15 years. His confidence and a look of depth betrayed something more. Carly, noticing this unusual oral tinge, drew her own conclusion. This young man would undoubtedly become an object of attention for girls in the future. His eyes were full of mystery, as if he hid incredible possibilities that were just beginning to unfold. Past and future merging into an unknowable perspective made Elad an enigmatic figure in Carly's life. Her musings stretched forward, trying to anticipate how the Marquis would find himself woven into the fabric of her own history. In this innocent observation, there was a kind of hope for a future full of unexpected twists and turns and discoveries that could change the course of events in her life. Elad, with a well-mannered twinkle in his eyes, politely offered a cup of tea, the subtle aroma of which filled the room. Carly politely declined the beverage, however, preferring to keep her thoughts clear at this moment. With gentleness, the Marquis seated himself, as if adjusting to the rhythm of the conversation. He was like a keeper of secrets, ready to listen to Carly and give her space to state the reasons for his unexpected arrival. Elad's gaze was respectful, but at the same time cautious, as if he sensed that the conversation would touch on something deep and important. So began the conversation, where Carly explained the nature of the incident at the hotel, revealing to Elad a picture of the potential threat. The Marquis listened attentively, as if discovering a new chapter in the story, which he immediately began to analyze in his mind, ready to contribute to the investigation. Carly Browning took the role of host, introducing each of the participants in the conversation. Her name sounded like an echo of legend, filling the space inside the room with power and influence. Every word she spoke seemed to carry weight, as if she were responsible for the fate of the entire kingdom. Then, with noble confidence, Carly introduced Harper, her staunch ally and hotel manager. He appeared to Elad as the one standing guard over Carly's interests, ready to support her every step of the investigation. There was a glint of skill in his eyes as he kept the situation under control, and in that moment Harper became part of this story where each character carried their own weight of exceptional importance. And then, like a sudden plot twist, Carly noticed Harriet Arden, an elderly but imposing woman. Her appearance, in spite of her age, expressed a strength and refinement that gave her a special charm. Harriet was living proof that age was no barrier to influence. Elad, looking at this woman, realized that everyone in their company carried history and wisdom, making events even more interesting. Esalad. The name sounded like a melody barely touched by a pianist on a concert stage. The response to this enigmatic greeting was only Elad's implacable silence. He left a trail of mystery behind him, as if inviting us to delve into the unknown world of his thoughts and intentions. Carly's gaze, observing Esalad, caught the details that made him stand out from the rest. His young age, the epitome of innocence, was matched by an unusual caution in his actions. It was as if shadows of mystery lurked in his eyes, hiding much from view. Carly, with her usual determination, could not help noticing that Esalad, despite his youth, was remarkably attentive. And when she noted aloud that the young man was unaware of her impending visit, an invisible thread of interest sprang up in the room, linking their events into a single web of mystery. Esalad became part of the weave of secrets that seemed to be beginning to unravel in this incredible story. Carly wisely decided not to go into long stories, but instead handed Elad a sealed letter. As if anticipating the questions in his eyes, she handed him the paper that, under the seal of her company, concealed the essence of their mission. The letter was like a lock that held the clues to the mysteries shrouding the incident at the hotel. When Elad picked it up, the weight of the moment enveloped them both. In that moment, the paper became not just a document, but an important artifact, the unraveling of which would open the door to a game-changing mystery. The delicate browning seal set the letter apart from the others, as if to remind him of the influence Carly carried. Elad, opening the letter, witnessed the clue that fate had placed before him in the form of ink lines describing the untold details of their arrival. So began a new chapter in the story, where words on paper took on a life of their own and riddles were solved, revealing the plot in all its complexity. Elad, opening the letter eagerly and curiously, was shocked at what appeared before his eyes. Marriage contracts, questionnaires, and other documents painted a bleak picture of a future he had no idea of. A wave of surprise came over him like a sudden storm that turned his thoughts upside down. In an attempt to understand what was happening, he tried unsuccessfully to stop Carly. The jumbled words in his speech betrayed his inner storm of thoughts, striving to grip the ground that had lost its stability. He stood in the way of this unexpected flow, trying to comprehend what marriage might be behind all this paperwork. Carly, being a skillful leader, steadfastly explained the order of the documents, revealing to Hellas the essence of their arrival. But the Marquis's gaze did not take his eyes off the documents, as if they were an ominous portent of the changes looming over his life. At that moment, the mix of business and personal relationships created a whirlwind of emotions and misunderstandings, leaving Elad with a frozen expression on his face, unable to understand what kind of marriage they were talking about. Elad, exploding with honesty, declared that he was seeing Carly for the first time and couldn't fathom the meaning of the marriage in question. His face reflected disbelief and misunderstanding, as if he were in uncharted waters where each wave brought a new mystery. Carly, however, despite all these surprises, only smiled, as if mysteriously enjoying the moment. She paced her board like an experienced chess player, wielding every piece in this unexpected game. "I have no one but you, Elad," she said, weaving a fraction of tenderness and mesmerizing mystery into her words. Goosebumps of horror ran through the Marquis, as if the passage of time had stopped before this unusual declaration. Living proof that the forces controlling their destinies were playing their mysterious games was something that made Elad's heart beat with unusual intensity. In that moment, he realized that the line between reality and mystery was blurred, and the game may have just begun. Elad, feeling agitated and embarrassed, turned away, as if trying to hide his emotions from Carly's gaze. The moment the air was filled with tension, the Marquis witnessed his own inner turmoil mingling awkwardly with the new reality offered by this mysterious woman. Carly, watching his reaction, hesitated. Her mind, rational and determined as usual, began working on the idea of how to lightly coerce Elad. The fire of strategy flashed in her eyes, as if she were ready to use all her strength to play the game by her own rules. In that tense silence, an invisible battle of interests was playing out, and Carly's gaze, as she faced Elad, who had turned away, was filled with ambivalence, the desire for power and the desire to awaken something new in this young Marquis. Their fates were intertwined, and Carly, like a mistress of magic threads, was determined in her quest to bring about the desired outcome. Carly, like a skillful storyteller, began to unfold before Hellas the picture of her proposals. She masterfully described the advantages that awaited the Marquis, emphasizing that nothing was required of him but to accept these undeniable benefits. Her words flowed smoothly like a river of promises, creating the illusion that unlimited possibilities were hidden in this contract. Elad, inexperienced in such matters, stared at the treaty in silence, as if he were faced with a riddle to solve. At that moment, he felt like a sailor sailing in uncharted waters, where every crossroads warned that not only pros but also unknown dangers might await him beyond the horizon. The Marquis's doubts were plastered on his face, and his eyes, lost in the details of the document, spoke of his inner search for answers. Carly, watching him, knew that the decision not to accept entry into this unusual alliance was not on the surface of his mind. In this mind game where the contract was the key, she sought to instill in Helad that there was potential in this enticing offer that was worth pursuing. Carly, detecting Elad's look of doubt, suggested that the Marquis consult with the elder. In this suggestion sounded not only concern for his decision, but also the realization that the elder was also bound to this treaty. Carly, as if anticipating the questions, approached the solution to this riddle with extreme care. Elad, slightly surprised that Carly knew about his roommate, could not hide his amazement. He had met her only that day, and the sudden mention of his personal life raised questions. However, when Carly, with a smile, revealed her cards, admitting that she couldn't forget about Elad's family, it added a note of personal warmth and consideration to their conversation. At this point, Carly showed that she was not only a cunning business wizard, but also a keen observer, willing to incorporate every aspect of the Marquis's life into her plans. As if opening a new chapter in their pact, she became not only an initiator, but also a partner in this strange dance where business and personal relationships were woven together in a marvelous combination. Eolad, deep in thought, sank into contemplation. He realized that despite Carly's awareness of his personal life, she carefully referred to the elder as his family, even though in practice there was no kinship between them. In that moment, he felt the concept of family take on a new, broader meaning, not just in blood ties, but in the bonds created in the process of living together. Carly's cheerful note that the elder was on his way added a note of lightness to the conversation. The moment, like a playful note in a complex piece of writing, highlighted the fact that there was room for both humor and surprising interaction in their game. Carly seemed to view her life as a compelling script where each character has a role to play, including the elder who is currently contributing his note to this compelling story. The elder, a wise old man with a magnificent mustache, stepped out when he heard the commotion that had penetrated his customary retreat. Calmly ascending the steps, he directed his attention to Carly, and his gaze, as if flying for centuries, caught the moment when the businesswoman first entered his territory. "Who are you?" the elder asked, his voice sounding like an echo of time, and in every word a long history resounded. His mustachioed figure, which emphasized his status in this kingdom, stood in front like a gateway to forgotten times. Carly, running her eyes over the mustachioed elder, began to speculate that this might be Albert, the third-generation homeowner of the Helid family. This speculative glimpse into the past gave her a new perspective on their marriage and the connections it might imply. Instead of continuing with the introductions, Carly, who turned out to be much more entrepreneurial, instead of taking the usual route, demanded documents from Harper. Her business approach was once again coming to the fore. She was willing to reveal secrets not only of Elad's personal but also business past in order to shed light on the undiscovered sides of this marriage deal. With this demand, determination and purposefulness were woven into her voice, like that of a proprietress who was ready to solve the major mysteries of her kingdom. Carly, like a nimble strategist, handed the wedding contract to the elder. The elder, with his wise eyes, began to read the document, drowning in the text like an ancient newspaper full of unknown tidings. Suddenly, the moment when the elder came to shock was inevitable. His face, which usually remained calm, slowly transformed under the impact of what he had read. His eyes widened as if reflecting a long history, and his expressive whiskers twitched slightly like twigs of wind before a storm. This moment of unexpected revelation became a time of stunned realization as past and present collided in an incredible cocktail of feelings. In the hands of the elder was not only paper, but the link between two worlds, two eras, and the power of this realization became a bright spot in their fascinating saga. Noticing Albert's reaction, Carly, like a researcher, pointedly noted that the elder was not as unshakable as he seemed. At this moment, not only the secrets of the wedding contract began to be revealed, but also the hidden facets of the elder's personality. Her words sounded like a note in the book of time, where each character could open a new chapter of their existence. At the same time, Harriet, the doctor, as a sensitive guardian of health, began to care for Albert. Her hands, experienced and affectionate, became a kind of cover for someone who had just been on the verge of emotional distress. This unexpected turn of events added an element of human warmth to their story, as if reminding them that even in the whirlwind of business intrigue, there is room for feelings and care. Albert, pulling himself together, said that everything was fine, but demanded an explanation of what was going on. His voice sounded like an ancient sword responding to the call of the times. Carly, accepting the challenge, began to explain the reason for her arrival, claiming that the paperwork detailed everything. Albert, however, suddenly interrupted her and said that it was insolent of Carly to show up to a member of a high-ranking family. That moment became a slowed-down string in the sound, where gazes clashed and words became subtle weapons in their conversation. Albert, as the head of the family, proved to be a not-so-easy opponent. His determination was like an ancient stone that was not going to yield to mere raindrops. In this confrontation of influence and determination, Carly had to rise to the challenge and figure out what her place in the kingdom was meant to be. Carly, catching a hint of arrogance in the air from the ruined aristocrat Albert, realized that even in hard times he remained a haughty member of the aristocracy. She took his subtle disdain as an echo of the lost luxury he still carried with him, like his last upper-class brochure. Light-heartedly and with a smile that served as her shield in business battles, Carly replied that she had indeed dared to come and saw nothing in it to stop her. Her words were like a fresh breeze dispelling the haze of aristocratic patina, and she didn't plan on surrendering to someone else's arrogant game. Marquis L.A., already bankrupt and having lost almost all of his fortune, was left with only his family name, which was perhaps the last shield in his struggle for survival. But even in this position, arrogance and an aristocratic sense of superiority did not leave him. He, on the verge of losing everything, still felt that Carly was allowing herself too much, infiltrating their home as if it were her own palace of high society. This dynamic between the Marquise and Carly became like a mirror reflecting their destinies. One steeped in a storm of financial hardship, and the other carrying a storm of ambition and determination. Carly, calm even in the face of aristocratic arrogance, noted that Albert must have underestimated her, mistaking her for an ordinary businesswoman. With a sense of surprising confidence, she introduced herself as Carly Browning, bringing to light the information she could dig up on the Marquis family. Esselad began to shake slightly, and Carly's words sounded like a ringing denunciation. "With all these facts," she said, giving the words special weight, "I simply cannot be a rival to the Elad family. After all, there is nothing to rival." Her statement was like a declaration, filled not only with information, but with an inner realization that fighting in the business world is an art that requires a deeper perspective and a high degree of skill. Esselad, meeting Carly's gaze, expressed his surprised interest. "So you're doing the investigation yourself?" Marquis marveled. He followed every word carefully, waiting for the continuation of this unexpected turn of events. Esselad, sensing that the game had moved to a new level, asked another question, looking into Carly's eyes. "Do you really think I'll accept your offer?" There was a mixture of doubt and exploratory interest in his tone. In answer to his question, Carly looked up at him with an exquisite smile full of mystery. "Merchants, Esselad, never make decisions in passing," she uttered with a confidence that reflected not only her businesslike nature, but also hinted at the deep secrets that might lurk behind the facade of a successful business empire. Carly, maintaining her confidence, replied with a slight tinge of mystery. "Esselad, this kind of thing is not just about suggestions. It's about making sure the questions come up at the right time. Think about that when your decisions begin to dance on the line between opportunity and risk." Thus, the tension in the room was building, and between Carly and Esselad, a complex game was beginning, one in which every move could affect the fate not only of their own enterprises, but of the entire kingdom. But it was not only the struggle for power that flickered in their eyes, but also the strange alliance of different interests, mysteries, and ambitions. Carly, with pride and clarity in her gaze, clarified that she had a conscience, and therefore had no intention of behaving in front of Esselad like a real husband. This detail in her plan added a note of honesty and incorruptibility, creating a contrast in their complicated relationship. Harper, who stood by Carly's side, commented on the situation, explaining that many men seek to get close to Carly in an effort to gain access to her wealth. It was for this reason that they had decided to enter into a sham marriage, despite the difficulties associated with a partnership like Esselad. There was some validity in his words and a desire to protect Carly from hypocritical scheming. Thus, Carly and Esselad's relationship glossed over not only business negotiations, but also moral principles, creating additional complexities in this compelling scenario, where intrigue wove its way through a world of wealth, power, and unexpected alliances. Esselad scrutinized the lucrative contract, which opened his greedy eyes to the vast opportunities afforded by the agreement. The document clearly stated that Carly would pledge to support him in every way possible, while the Marquis was only required to make a minimal public display of their relationship. Esselad raised his eyebrows slowly. realizing how much this deal was good for his ambitions. Carly, standing in front of him, stated with confidence, "All that is required of you is a signature, Esselad. Other than that, I will adjust to your wishes." Her words sounded like diplomatic harmony, mixing flexibility and arrogance. Carly's gaze read like an open book where each phrase was an intricately arranged puzzle in a strategic game of power. The contract thus became not only a legal document, but also the key to a new stage in their complex relationship, where every move could change the balance in this intriguing drama of wealth and power. Elliot expressed his incredulity at the common words, as if questioning the content of what was being said. Looking at Carly, he raised an eyebrow with a studying expression, as if trying to penetrate the mysteries of her motivations. In response to his doubts, Carly calmly remarked, "That's what the contract is for, Elad." Her confidence and insistence suggested that every clause of the agreement had been carefully considered, and words were but a shadow of the commitments they'd made. There was a palpable tension in the room, as if there were unspoken questions and unspoken doubts in the air. The contract became the invisible thread that connected them in this complex web of intrigue and power, and every movement became charged not only with words, but with the legal force of the agreement. Esselad looked at Carly with a puzzled expression, not knowing whether to believe her or not. There was doubt in his eyes, but he realized that perhaps Carly represented his best chance that fate had given him. A short time later, Carly was sitting in her office, an expression of embarrassment playing across her face. She reported that she had just been kicked out. In a moment of frustration and uncertainty, the fateful twists of fate had become apparent, and now Carly was facing a new reality full of challenges and unknowns. Amy, not missing a moment, noticed Carly's failing negotiating skills and was more than happy to throw in her venomous remarks. Her jokes about how Carly could have a sensational retirement at the peak of her career not only added to the unpleasantness of the situation, but also irritated Carly. By hinting that she was willing to put her future in Amy's hands, Carly may have been trying to play on her subordinate's feelings, but Harper, a staunch ally and hotel manager, couldn't let such bold words go unheeded. His calculating eye could easily spot Carly's wrong move in this playing field of business intrigue. The moment the conversation touched on where the Marquis resided, Amy, with her characteristic curiosity, decided to inquire into the details. "And where does this Marquis in fact dwell?" she asked suddenly, as if trying to delve into the secrets of the aristocracy. Carly, lifting her eyes from the papers, looked at Amy with mild surprise. "To Elm Green," she replied slowly, dejected. But Amy's surprise was exceeded when she expressed her displeasure. "To Elm Green? The ruined Marquis chose Elm Green for his retreat?" Carly snickered, suddenly feeling less informed on the matter. "Well, Elad, Elm Green, does it matter?" Carly tried to justify herself, but she sounded less confident. Still, in a world of wealth and influence, even the slightest detail about where one lived could matter in the eyes of society. Sharing old architectural chronicles and myths of the past, age-old legends have elevated the Elad family to the status of a source of immense power. Deeply respected and often enigmatic, the Marquises of Elad became an integral part of the land, nurturing its prosperity through the power of their influence. In the darkness of bygone eras, it was said that every stone, every house created on this blessed land was imbued with the power of the Marquises. From wise decisions in politics to magnificent works of art, all of these creations have been attributed to the influence of this noble family. Tales have been passed down of how the land of Elad itself succumbed to the power of the Marquis, giving their lives exceptional grandeur. Over time, however, as the waves of change rolled in, the Elad family faced the challenges of fate. Greatness faded, might diminished, and the land where the Marquis's throne once shone witnessed the fading of great glory. Since ancient times, the Helad family had owned not only land, but wealth that radiated light and influence. However, as time passed, as in a sort of echo of past triumphs resounding in the distant halls of castles, the greatness of the family began to fade. Having left their colorful peaks in history, the Hellas were now in a different, more humble position. Surrounded by the shadow of their former greatness, the members of the Hellas family adapted to the new reality as if transplanted into retirement. They were granted a pension in the form of a title that became a kind of reflection of their once great power. The castles that once served as symbols of power became their cozy homes, and the title became a kind of sign of respect for the ancient family. Retirement has become a time of rest and reminiscence for the Elad family. Perhaps it is not so much the light of power that flickers in their eyes now, but the light of long years spent in service to their people and land. Leaving the cozy walls of Elm Green after her meeting with the Hellas, Carly, in her steadfastness and vigilance, decided to warn of her misgivings. You know, she spoke, looking at Amy, this visit to the Hellas could attract trouble. The bandits might see it as the perfect opportunity for extortion or attack. Not wanting to leave anything to chance, Carly resolutely provided her contact information, emphasizing the importance of prompt communication in the event of an emergency. Amy, with her characteristic sense of humor, didn't miss the opportunity to joke about it. "Oh, Carly, don't even try to hide your real motives," she remarked cheerfully. "Seeing Esselad again is just too beautiful to let him go so easily. You fell in love, and now you're pretending to be a caring business wizard to arouse his chivalrous feelings." Carly, smiling slightly, noted that for once she actually cared about something more than her emotions. With the clarity and equanimity characteristic of Carly Browning, she responded to Amy, dismissing speculation of a possible romantic involvement with Esselad. "Amy, I have principles," she declared, looking her in the eye with unwavering certainty. "I'm not going to fall in love with teenagers. My interests are far more mature and considered." Amy seemed to catch the hint of non-seriousness in Carly's tone at her assumptions. Despite her jocularity, she may have begun to realize that there wasn't much room for romance in this story. Suddenly, while Carly and Amy were discussing their business strategies in the comfort of Carly's home office, a maid appeared with a cart loaded with a variety of desserts. The aroma of fresh pies and gourmet candies filled the room, creating an atmosphere of unexpected pleasure. Amy, delighted with the desserts, expressed her delight. It seems that even in the privacy of her home, Carly never misses an opportunity to create an exquisite table. These desserts are truly a work of art. Carly, with a smile, welcomed the unexpected surprise, realizing that inside her home, too, she could create an atmosphere of luxury and pleasure. Immersed in the discussion, Carly and Amy decided to turn their attention to the question of whether the Hellas had received any support from other aristocrats since their decline. But unfortunately, the conversation revealed the bitter reality that in the world of the aristocracy, even after the beautiful facades begin to crack, there is very little support and sympathy. It turned out that none of the former social colleagues were reaching out to Hellas. The emblem of old valor and might was gone, and the remaining aristocrats, in their selfish concern only for their own interests and purses, chose to stay away. This revealed the dark side of a society where concern for one's own well-being took precedence over solidarity and support in times of need. Ernest, who had been closely following Carly and Amy's conversation, decided to do his part by adding that Albert Elliot was probably wary of the power of aristocrats. This, he suggested, may have played an important role in the sad downfall of the Elliot family. Amidst the heightened social and political dynamics of the time, Albert may have been at the center of the internal struggles and intrigues of aristocratic society. This mindset of wariness toward the old orders and power structures could arguably have been a barrier to the Hellas's support from other aristocrats. In a world of intrigue and intense clashes of interest, such relationships alone may have had a significant impact on the family's decline and their attempts to maintain their position in aristocratic society. Marie, the attentive and caring maid in Carly's home, contributed her invisible mark to the moment of conversation. "Do you need anything else, Mrs. Carly?" she asked, looking attentive, as if always ready to fulfill any request of her mistress. When she heard that nothing further was required, however, Marie departed with a quiet smile, taking with her the cart on which the remains of the sweet delicacies were barely migrating. In her quiet departure sounded not only devotion, but also the invisible art of service, leaving behind an atmosphere of comfort and carefreeness in Carly's home. Suddenly, Carly, remembering the unpleasant incident of last month, decided to inquire about the fate of that intruder who had broken into her room. "What became of that rascal who showed up in my room a month ago?" she asked, directly expressing her concern. Amy, in response to a question, shared that thanks to the influence of the man's family, the case was hushed up. There was a shadow of discontent and frustration in this response at how often influential families can pressure justice by shutting out law and order. Instead of holding the perpetrator accountable, the case was suppressed, leaving questions unanswered and punishment without a trace.